Here
Okay.
again. Yes, and here's Lis Goodwin. Tell us what we're talking about today.
All right. We're going to be talking more about the subject of cursed objects. Jackson did a great show talking about idols. And there are some other categories of cursed objects that I want to cover. We've got three particular categories that these things can fall into. And I really want to share this information because I've had some horrible experiences, and it would be really good if people didn't fall into some of the mistakes that I've made in my life. And I hope this will just help people if you've got issues with your own, within your own home, within your own family, or if you are helping a friend or a loved one who's having problems. It could be really helpful to just spot these problems. So the first one I want to talk about is legal rights and legal grounds. Now, there are certain things that God tells us in the Bible that are just forbidden for us. We do not do the things that the pagans do. We don't worship him that way. We don't have idols. We don't make graven images.
No.
And so if we own these things, we are in direct conflict with the commandments of God, and we don't want to do that. But there are other more subtle things that very many of us don't think about. So if we just think about what is a legal right and legal ground. Now, if you own your home or you are renting your home, you have a piece of paper that states it either belongs to you or you have a right to live in this place. It is a document that states that you have the right to be there. But if we bring things into our home that belong to the enemy, for example, things with occult symbols on them or symbols of other religions, then, well, that's a legal right and legal ground. The enemy can actually come in and say, well, you've got this thing here that belongs to me. I'm going to sit on this thing. If you just imagine if you had a whole lot of things with occult symbols on them, if you just imagine a little demon sitting on each of them, you don't want those guys in your home. That's just going to create chaos. So I want to think about what those items might be. Now, obviously, those things that are clear to us, graven images, we don't want those in our homes. We're not going to worship God in a pagan way. When we think about images, Jackson, when you think about the Ten Commandments and you think about likenesses, do you always consider the meaning of that word where it says likeness as being a 3D thing? Does it have to be a 3D thing?
Well, really, on the main, but there are certain things that I was thinking of just now that aren't necessarily 3D, especially like pagan tattoos.
Yeah.
You've got to do something about that. And if a 2D picture is worshipped, certainly if you're worshiping that picture, I know a lot of people have icons that they don't venerate them, they worship them. And so you've got a 2D idols there.
Yeah.
But I think in the main, they're talking about 3D, and because also it says, as I mentioned at that time, it's a twofold commandment. If you form these things, and which I take as an exclusive or an inclusive, and if you worship these things, then you're in trouble. What do you think?
Well, I'm always reminded of you know, the old thing of the creepy painting, you know, the painting of the woman whose eyes follow you around the room. Yeah. Have you ever had that experience, even with photographs, where you feel like you're being watched?
Yeah. In fact, I'm not even sure if those are 2D. If you can perceive that as 3D, then it becomes for you 3D, and especially if you've got a portrait up there like Dorian Gray. I mean, your things following you around, and something's fishy there. And in my last message, we had an angelic picture that was probably about 4 or 5 feet tall, and that thing did, but we really, I was always bothered with it. And I'm glad that the guy said, let's get rid of that thing.
Yeah.
And that at the time, my late wife, she agreed. Okay, let's get rid of that. I was concerned.
Yeah.
Right,
a friend of mine was
more.
Well, a friend of mine was telling me she recently bought an apartment here in the city, and one of the things that was in the apartment was a painting, and it was, I think, a portrait of a woman. And she just said, this thing just gave me the creeps. So she, of course, as we do here, we do recycling in a different way. we put things out in the street near the bin, and then someone else just comes and takes them. You know, if they want them, they take them. If not, well, you know, they get thrown away.
We're doing that now too.
Yeah. So just literally, she put it out. She got rid of it, and I think that's really important. If you and I'll talk about this a little bit more as we go on. This idea of things that make you uncomfortable, because this is not, you know, when we talk about a 2D image, is it prohibited? I don't think that that is clear, but I think that we have to, as it were, we have to trust that we're going to be guided right with these things to do the right thing. But let's think now about symbols. That's a great example with a tattoo. Absolutely, those things are not only toxic, but that's a very, very serious thing to have those things on your body. You're carrying them around all the time. You're marked out, and those things can be covered. So you can go to another tattooist, and you can get that thing, you know, blacked out, something like that, so that it's no longer there and can't be seen. But there are so many things that we kind of might allow into our homes just out of ignorance. When I looked at this apartment, one thing that was here that thankfully wasn't here when I moved in was a dream catcher. This is not something you want in your home. This is absolutely not what you want in your home. We don't want things from foreign religions. So we don't want anything to do with yoga, anything to do with mandalas and those kind of things. No graven images, no molded images, no symbols like the yin yang symbol, which comes from ancient Chinese philosophy. Books on the occult. Now, I will say, as somebody who burnt 200 pounds worth of books on the occult, if the Lord is guiding you to study this subject matter for a specific reason, because you are a minister, so in your case, Jackson, you may well have things like that you study because it's important to teach people.
Yes.
But otherwise, I would caution people, get rid of those things, take them out to the garden incinerator and burn them.
My first experience with visible demons was that, you know, as a teenager, I went to Chicago and bought some occult books that I thought would be interesting. And I was a believer. And I started reading this Dictionary of Witches and Dictionary of Demons, Angels, and they came. They came at night, and it affected me my whole life. And of course, I took that stuff out and burned it up. You have to. Yeah. Nowadays, if I want to study something like Kahuna, for instance, I will get the books and then I will dispense with them when I'm done. Yeah,
that's a very, very wise thing to do. Yes, I was, as the granddaughter of a Freemason, I was, of course, very drawn to the occult. And so I had all sorts of things that I was drawn to, including divination and those kind of things. That stuff needs to leave. If you have, for example, a bag of runes, those little stones with rune symbols on them as a form of divination, get rid. Pendulums, all these things.
I'll just remind the audience that you did a testimonial on these things a couple of months ago, and you were very deep into it.
I was. Another thing that people sometimes forget about are lucky items, so-called lucky items. Let's put that in air quotes. So the lucky rabbit's foot, the lucky four-leaf clover. We rely on God. God is the one who we give glory to. We don't give glory to anything else.
But so are those things efficacious to heathens? that don't have,
No,
have a lick?
I don't think they have any. Don't think they have any effect on anybody. But it's one of those things that people sometimes just have them in the back of a drawer somewhere because it was Granny's, you know.
Granny's rabbit's foot.
Yeah, that's it. And these kind of things can just. We don't want to give any glory to anyone but our God.
Since we last talked, my mother was killed in a traffic accident, and she had she traveled widely. She was given a gift of a collage, a large collage of a tiger by some Chinese people. And that thing always bothered me. And then when her stuff was passed out, her remains, here comes that thing to my house.
Oh,
because, well, I won't go into why or how, but that thing has bothered me all the time. But the ones that wanted it, it didn't bother them at all. I had to say, get this thing out of here.
Yeah.
I can't be inheriting this, what I'm sure has been manufactured in paganism.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So legal rights and legal grounds. I'm just going to, before we move on to the next category, I really want to just show some of these images. So let's just remind me how to do this. I want to share my screen.
Yes.
Can you enable that?
I'm sorry I did it. Hold on. There you are.
Lovely. Oops, hold on.
Go
too quick. Let's try. That's not working.
You're getting a message? It says you're the co-host now.
Okay. Here we go. That's what I'm after. Fantastic. So let's go to here. And I'm going to just look at. Okay. So here we have some occult symbols. Many of these you will recognize. The Eye of Horus, the pentagram, the inverted pentagram. Really important that you just look for some of these and avoid them.
Okay, I'm not seeing them right now.
Okay, hold on. I must be doing something wrong. I've clicked the wrong thing. Here we go. There we go.
Yeah, something.
All right.
There we go.
We want to avoid the pentagrams, all of these things.
Just about everything on there.
Sorry?
Just about everything you've got on there.
Just about everything on there. Let's look at the next page. So we've got some more symbols here. So these are more of the occult symbols. The horned hand here. We don't, I mean, people do accidentally make that hand signal, but we don't want to be doing it deliberately, that's for sure. The all-seeing eye. Some years ago, I did a blog post on occult casual wear, like t-shirts and things like that, that for some reason all suddenly had the all-seeing eye on them. And this is not something that we want. What is that horn hand? You see that all the time now. What is that, a devilish sign? Yes, that. Now, if you see it and if the thumb is across, when you see it, I'm not going to make the symbol, but if the thumb is across and not out, apparently that is actually sign language. Oh, yeah. People. But that symbol is definitely not. So when you see the thumb sticking out like that, then it's not. And in fact, a friend of mine was working as a teacher, and he said that he had the strangest experience with his students. If he drew a triangle, someone would automatically draw an eye in the middle of it. And so the kids, like the kids, their textbooks that they would write in, their exercise books, would have these triangles with the all-seeing eye that they had drawn themselves. This was one of their things that they would draw all over their exercise books. This is not good. It's not good. And we see these symbols. Another one is the anarchy symbol, which I don't think I've got an image of anywhere, but that's another one. When you see these kind of symbols drawn in this archaic way, don't let those things in your home. Never have anything like this in your home. Upside down crosses. I mean, obviously we wouldn't have those things in our home. But sometimes people are just drawn to something and they don't see the patterns in it. They don't see what's going on. Obviously, we've got the symbol of Freemasonry, and we want to avoid the yin yang. This is not something that we want in our homes, and yet it's very common. It turns up on jewelry and shopping bags and things like that all the time. The other one that's so common that's actually on the middle of this page here is the owl. The amount of owl imagery that has appeared in the last 5 years, particularly in homewares. I noticed it in England, it was all over everything. There would be little candle holders shaped like owls, and there would be handbags covered in little pictures of owls. This is an unclean bird, and it has a spiritual significance, and I think it's something to do with Moloch. I think this is what they have at Bohemian Grove, isn't it? Is the giant stone owl.
May I interrupt you with another short story? Okay.
Do.
After I spoke last Shabbat, and I talked about owls and toads, the other day, it was at a time during the day that I'm really not dressed or anything, and the doorbell started to ring like crazy. Ding, 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 like, you know, somebody's out there that's going to tell you someone in your family died. And finally, when somebody got the door, there was a frog on the button.
Oh,
a
my
frog
word.
had somehow gotten clear up on that button and was ringing that bell all that time. And of course, like I said, I think it was Sunday. This is right the day after we talked about such things as that. And I couldn't help but consider that as significant. The devil's knocking at your door.
Yes.
Now.
Yep.
I wish I had a picture of it.
That's amazing. And I wonder why. Because these are the sort of things that anyone who's in ministry, we must be sure to keep very, very close to the Lord and consistently ask for his protection, because the enemy would like nothing more than to hurt us when we are ministering to other people. If the enemy can destroy the local vicar, the local priest, whatever it might be, bring him down with, I mean, churches in England where they find that, you know, occult rituals have been done on the site and things like that. This is the sort of thing that can destroy a ministry.
Those priests of the Church of England are done.
Yeah, the Church of England is in a dreadful state.
Yes, it is.
It really
if I was going to be in church, that's where I would be, except for what's been going on the last 10, 15 years.
They have now a bishop who's a Freemason, and they say that's fine. They're just not, they don't keep the commandments.
No, not at all.
If you don't study Torah, how do you know what sin is? Sin is transgression of the law. If you don't study the law, what do you know? How do you know what to be sorry for? They don't teach it. No, it's that simple.
But they don't teach it.
No, they don't. Now, this is particularly interesting. New Age symbols. New Age symbols, and I'm not going to click on any of these because they all go to Pinterest and they'll just, the links won't work. But this idea of sigils, again, this is another form of occult practice.
Sigil.
Very
S-I-G-I-L? Okay.
Yeah. And here we see a lot of these that are hand-drawn, and that has become more and more popular. And of course, this is just another form of witchcraft.
So those pictures are sigils.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah, these little drawings, these little, and of course they're supposed to be, they're supposed to have power. Well, of course, they don't have any of themselves, but of course they can be imbued with those things. And within the occult, we don't want these things in our homes, on our clothes, on our shopping bags, nothing like that. Keep those things away. Now, this one is one of the most important. This is, of course, known as the peace symbol.
Mhm.
And I don't know how many of the audience will recognize it as a satanic symbol, but I hope that they're all way ahead of me before I even say this. This is the broken cross. So when somebody is initiated into Satanism, they take a cross, they turn it upside down, and they stamp on the arms of the cross to break them down. And that's the image that we see here.
On a supermarket some years ago, there was a 4-letter word, BOGO. I had no idea what that meant in a supermarket, buy one, get one. But it turned out not only had this popped up everywhere, but that's the pagan name in Russia for God. Of course, it came, you ought to be able to check that out. Bogo is
in Russian. Well, there are of course different. Nothing's ever simple in Russian, because of course there are so many cases and ways that you can say something. But God, the word God is Bog, which is B-O-G. And he is also referred to, I believe, as Господин, which is Lord, Sir. It's almost like that. It's like,
yeah, sir. Like in Spanish, Senor. Okay.
I'm probably getting that slightly wrong, but my Russian is not great, but I'm still working on it. So this symbol, if you go to the supermarket and you find, for example, just check your Ben & Jerry's ice cream before you take it home, because in England, I've seen Ben & Jerry's ice cream, it's covered in the peace symbol, this so-called peace symbol, which is a satanic symbol. So you might have to switch your ice cream brand in order to avoid bringing this into your home. But I highly recommend that you do not bring this into your home, because it's not a good thing.
For sure.
These symbols are, we live in ignorance of what these things mean. They're hidden in plain sight. So if you have old books with these things in, part with them. It will be better for you to part with them.
If you don't recognize it as such, is it still harmful?
It's like, okay, so when I mentioned in my testimony that I had bought a very scary looking book called Unbroken Curses by Rebecca Brown. Yeah. And the first time I read that book, there's a lovely, long and helpful list of all the things you need to get rid of. So if you've traveled and someone has given you, for example, some carved mask or something like that you've brought back, get rid. Anything that gives glory to another god, get rid. Just get rid of those things. But the stuff that I had done, I had used, where did I get them from? They weren't sigils, but they were something not dissimilar to that I had used in my house. Now, I had no idea, of course, when I used them that they were a problem. But it wasn't until the second time that I read the book, some months later, that I actually found these things. So you may well go through this process of house cleaning more than once, because God is not going to burden you with everything all in one go. I had so much stuff. I had my grandfather's Masonic Lodge papers. I had, that was an obvious one. So once I realized that needed to go, it went. But other things were less obvious. But I went through a process of the first time round. I cleared a load of things. Maybe about a year later, I read the book again, and I'm like, ooh, I didn't spot that last time. And then I would get rid of the next lot.
Yeah, well, you were a professional diviner. I mean, you must have had a ton of those.
Well, yes, but then there's just these silly family items that you don't even think about until much later. So we had a toasting fork. We English have a tradition of toasting toast over an open fire, right? Toasting fork, just a traditional brass toasting fork, but it had a little demon on with serpents for hair. And I looked at this thing and I'm like, it's going. It had not occurred to me, and it would probably belong to my grandfather. I should imagine it had been in the family for a long time. So that had to go.
What about taking items like that and selling them?
what I did with that, because it was brass and because I wanted, as it were, its form to be got rid of, was I took it to the scrapyard so that it would be melted down. I
Yes.
didn't want it to just remain as it was and be thrown away. I wanted it to be melted down. But as it selling them, I mean, there were some items that I had that didn't really belong to me. They were family items, and I did sell those. I said to my mum, "Do you want to do that?" And that's what she did with them. And the money went between the family. And I mean, that's not, I don't think that's necessarily a good thing either. That's just, we did the best we could at the time.
Well, you had to do what she told you to do anyway.
Yeah, I think that the best thing to do with these things is always to destroy them, because if they're a legal right and legal ground in your home, they're going to be a legal right and legal ground in someone else's. And that just means you're allowing those influences to move into someone else's home, and we don't want that. So ideally, that's what you're going to do, is you're going to destroy those things. It's not always possible because of other people's rights over them. So those are the legal rights and legal grounds. Very important that we think about those items. But I'm going to move on to another area of cursed objects. And these are what we would call charged objects. These are objects which, now this collage that you were talking about, great example. There have been so many items that they just bother you. We don't know why. You feel uncomfortable thinking about those paintings. Is it to do with the fact that it's an image? Is it to do with the object itself? It's very, very hard to know.
The other people around here that are believers, really, they vied for taking that. And but this thing had bothered me for years. And I even took it out of the house, and my mother kvetched about it, because it was a gift to her and she liked it. She didn't have that problem, though she had a lot of spiritual discernment. I guess it was just me.
Yep, it's hard to know whether it's us or whether it's something that we're aware of that somebody else isn't aware of. But there are certainly issues where an object can be either deliberately or accidentally charged. With what I would call occult power. Now, there was an occultist called Dion Fortune who wrote a book which you can find free online. And I'm not sure whether Dion Fortune was male or female, actually. It's one of those names.
How do you spell that name?
D-I-O-N.
Okay.
D-I-O-N. This person wrote this book talking about how items can be charged, how you need to be careful. Some of the advice seems quite old-fashioned in a way. When I was a kid, I was always told you never put shoes on the table. Dion Fortune would agree with that. Dion Fortune would say you should leave your outdoor clothes as far away from your living area as possible, because as you go around, you're actually picking up other people's energy. I have no idea if there's any validity to that, but I will say that one thing that occultists love to do is to charge objects and then put them out there for people to pick up.
Well, linen is supposed to, I was going to say detract, but those kind of things are not supposed to be able to stick to linen, according to the experts on linen here.
That's interesting.
And yeah, I have linen clothes and I feel very comfortable in those clothes.
That's interesting. I've been hearing more about linen this year, and I must try and get some linen clothes. I think it would be very interesting to see what difference that makes. I'm sure there is something to that. So, for example, one of the examples that Dion Fortune gives is, it was a book that was published. I'm not sure whether it was like, I think she had like a stack, or he had a stack of these books, and they were charged with occult power in order that anybody who bought one or picked one up would be drawn to the occult. So we have to be very careful to have discernment, or to try to seek the Lord for discernment when we are out and about and we're picking things up and we're looking at things and so on. Another classic one: never pick up a penny in the street. Witches love to curse those things and leave them lying
Oh,
around. And I can tell you from personal experience that that does happen. You know, we have this idea of the curse causeless shall not alight, which is lovely, but we're all sinners. Therefore, we've
yeah.
all got some reason why something like that could land on us, and so we need to be careful. There are those kind of items have been deliberately charged. This has happened on purpose. And so if it's an occult item, an obvious occult item like a book on the occult, you're not going to pick that up. You know, just keep away from stuff like that if you can possibly avoid it, because it's not going to be good. But then we look at the accidentally charged objects. And these, just like this collage you were talking about, they just bother you and you don't know why. And I've come across this before where there will be an item. Now, I saw a beautiful handmade glass bowl. I'd seen it in an antiques place. I've seen it more than once there. And I decided that I would have this thing. And no sooner was it mine than I started to have very bad anxiety about it. I started to feel very uncomfortable about it. I took it to my home. I tried really hard to enjoy having this beautiful object. Now, this is not an obviously occult object in any way, shape, or form. This is just a bowl. It's a glass bowl, a beautiful bowl with kind of little bits of silver in it and beautiful pattern. And lovely. Nothing at all that could cause concern, but it always bothered me. And in the end, I had to get rid of it because I didn't like to touch it. I didn't like to pick it up. It just, there was something there. And it could just be.
Yeah. We didn't know what the problem was there.
No. And I actually think maybe the person who made it just had a bad day. This, we don't know. We can't know these things. Do we deposit energy on things that we've handled? Old things, for example, like antiquarian books, you know, antique furniture. I really don't know. But sometimes you're going to, as I have done, I've gone to antiques markets. There was a little thing I wanted to buy, and I remember just, nope, don't like that. It's not coming home with me. I don't know why, but I take it as a good sign that I was steered away from that thing. I was given a brass trivet. In England, traditionally, again, this was a thing that would sit by the fireplace. Yeah. So I put it in the kitchen to put hot pans on. Every time I touched it, I wanted to wash my hands. It just gave me the creeps, and I had no idea why. I cleaned that thing, I polished it. Every time I touched it, I was uncomfortable. I have no idea why. So if anyone who's listening to this, as they're listening now, that object that just come to your mind that you're thinking, I don't like, get rid of it. Get rid of it. Just give it away if you want to. It doesn't have this, there might not be anything sinister there in the sense of it being a spiritual thing. But if it's dragging you down and making you unhappy, if it bothers you every time you look at it, or it bothers you every time you're near it, get rid. Just get rid. You don't need that thing in your life. These are the kind of things that are just not necessary. We don't need those things in our lives. Does anything come to mind for you, Jackson, when I say that?
Well, besides those books years ago, not for me, not really. Mainly because I just don't collect those things. But I've been collecting something here lately, and that is model 1950s cars.
Oh,
that I have become very fond of looking at them on the internet and buying them when they're cheap. And I just like to look at them. I hope that I'm not getting an occult attachment to these cars, but my first car was a 1951 car and a bubble car, and I liked it. I've never really had an interest in these things before, but now in the last few months,
Yeah.
yes. Do you think that that's a baddie?
I think you have to just seek the Lord on it, because if it's not a good thing, he'll deal with you on it. He'll reveal it to you, and you'll be like, yeah, not so good. It's hard to know with these things, because for us it's just a fun pastime. It's not a serious thing. One other thing that I'm going to cover that is to do with accidentally charged objects. This is a story that I almost told in my testimony, but I knew that we might not have time to cover it, and it seems very relevant here. When I was in the occult, there was a couple of people who are probably still doing it now. They were dowsers. They were famous dowsers who dealt with problems with properties, old buildings, new buildings. There could be all sorts of things that can go on in these buildings. And they dealt with a woman who had a house with a really bad feeling. She'd had some work done on the house. The stonemason who'd worked on the house, it was a stone house. He'd repaired the house. After he left, didn't feel good. She didn't feel good. So she went to these people. Now, this is not what we do, of course. We don't go to occultists to get help with these problems. We go to the Lord to get help with these problems.
Yeah, although sometimes the occultists can be helpful.
Well, they're knowledgeable.
Knowledgeable.
Knowledgeable. That information can sometimes be really helpful, but it's we always have to seek the Lord, don't we, with these things? And information is one thing, and solving it. I don't know what they did. I have no idea how they fixed the problem, but it turned out that as he was working on the building, that all of his stress was going into those stones, and he was going through a divorce, and his business was failing, and there we have all of that going into those stones.
And the person in the house picked up on this?
Yes, it was probably the case that there was either somebody not sleeping properly after it, or there was some kind of bad feeling. It's so often the way with these kind of issues with houses, that there will be poor sleep or something like that indicates the issue. But yes, this was resolved, and it's one of those things that I found that particularly interesting, because the Bible, God says, if you're going to make me an altar of stones, make it of whole stones, not hewn stones. For when you raise a tool on stone, you pollute it. And so there's just that, for me, was amazing.
Did the occultists get rid of it or suppress it?
They did something, but I don't know what they did. But they did clear it. They did. I say they did clear it. I mean, this is the thing. When you go to the occult for help, it can be a little bit like you think you've solved this problem, but actually all you've done is you've removed that problem and you've brought yourself another problem, a different problem.
Okay, so is it possible, if there was nobody in that area that could help with this believer's answer to prayer on the house, that the Almighty might have sent the occultist in as being the only expert that could do anything for?
I think that if we need help with a problem, that God can do anything.
Okay.
And from my testimony of God removing that polyp from my uterus surgically, I know God can do anything. So if there's a problem and it needs to be solved, God is going to reveal the way to do it. And when we start to step outside, we end up in that whole kind of King Ahazia situation where we're going to someone else to ask to solve a problem.
Yes.
So we really want to just stay with the Lord on that.
I could go to the local pastor, and the local pastor is going to think you're crazy.
Been there, done that. my first church was a Baptist church, and I went there and I was having terrible trouble. And I spoke privately to the pastor, and I told him some of what was going on, and I was really suffering a lot with anxiety, and I really felt very, very spiritually oppressed. And of course, I was working as a kinesiologist and doing all of this stuff. And he just said, if you're having problems, you're not saved.
you're not saved?
Exactly, that's what he said. Even though
Well,
I'd had this
yes,
amazing experience and I knew the Lord and loved the Lord and all the rest of it, but that was his response. If you're having problems, you're not saved.
they don't know the real Hakodesh from a black cat. Yeah, I understand
So
that.
sad. Yeah.
Mhm.
So yeah, from my experience, I went from that, which is sort of like, if you imagine this end of the scale in the Christian church is very, very straight-laced. You know, nobody attempted to do healing. Actually, they did. I had one group who did a healing on me, or we sat in a prayer group and we did some healing. Pastor didn't like that at all. It made him uncomfortable. He wasn't happy about that. And I went to the Vineyard Church, which was exactly the opposite end of the spectrum. And then I went to another one in the middle. But actually, when it came down to it, for me, in 2013, when I began to study, when this issue of actually recognizing that specific thing about when you touch stone with metal, when you raise a tool on stone, you pollute it. That for me was a turning point, because I thought to myself, okay, there must be something to this law. There has to be something to it for that, you know, that, because I knew that it was true from my past in the occult, not my personal experience, but somebody else's experience.
You find that in the Torah? You
find it's actually 3 times in the Old Testament. One of them is, let me just see.
I'm going to make a note of it.
It is Exodus 20. Let's see, where is it? It's open here somewhere. Exodus 20:25.
Okay, that's right in the 10 Commandments area.
Yeah, so it says, now if you make an altar of stones for me, you must not build it with stones shaped by tools, for if you use a chisel on it, you will defile it. That's, I don't know which, that's the Berean.
I was thinking of the Ebenezer, which I think is in the book of Samuel, where they raised an Ebenezer. They took a stone, unhewed stone, and popped it on there as a memorial forever, but I don't remember them tooling it.
Yeah,
I was thinking there was some kind of a caption that they put around it, but evidently they didn't tool it on there.
Interesting. Yeah. So I think in conclusion, we just need to be aware and always go to the Lord if there are problems in your house. Now, you mentioned in that show that you did, Jackson, about dropping stuff. Yeah, now that's really interesting, because in this last week, I have dropped and broken a plate. I've dropped my phone twice. It's all right. It didn't break. And I've dropped my car keys twice as well. So I think there might be something going on in this apartment, which I will tell you has got an occult symbol painted in it, which has got to be removed. When I bought this apartment, I knew it was there, and it's actually on one of the doorposts. I think somebody who lived here just thought that was a fun thing to do, because of course it's what all, you know, I guess a bit like my friends' school pupils, you know, it was just the thing to do. So I must get on with scraping that off the doorpost, because that may well be a sign to me that there's an issue there.
I'd certainly think so.
Yeah, that was interesting. I've never seen a plate go so far. Smashed, bang, across the floor.
They will.
Yeah. So anything else, does anything else come to your mind when we talk about this subject of cursed objects?
The only thing that comes to my mind really is that I think 9 out of 10 believers would never consider this as a possibility. And so many believers, I've been in their houses and they've got knickknacks every place, including worshipful knickknacks like votive candles, and they've got a new votive candle out, I found out, with how they've got a picture of Jesus and the broken heart. Well, they've got a new one with the President of the United States on it, which I thought was pretty interesting. There were like 3 different ones: Biden, Bill Gates, and Elon Musk.
And these are votive candles?
Yeah, they're 8 inches tall. They're encased in glass, Usually you use those for occult purposes, a
That is awful.
Santeria.
Yeah, that is awful.
It's a kind of a joke
Mm.
thing, but I think that it could really yield some kind
Yeah,
of something going on in the background.
yeah.
Yeah, those
Interesting
things,
that-
a lot of people have those. They think it's, well, this is wonderful Jesus here on this candle. They don't understand what they're used for and actually cursed for.
Yeah, this is the thing.
Mhm.
It is so easy to bring something into your home that has been cursed. So another little story that's actually from Rebecca Brown's book was, and that is quite a helpful basic starter for anyone, particularly when it comes to recognizing the graffiti in your local town and where the occultists have been hanging out. Because when you see what's in her book and you see the symbols, the skull and crossbones, if you see that, you see the Anarchy symbol, which is the A with the circle. If you see those in your town, you know that the occultists have been around, that the Satanists have been around. But she talked about a couple who had had a problem. They had massive financial problems. They'd been incredibly successful. They had massive financial problems suddenly. And they had been given, I mean, they didn't even know what the problem was. But it turned out when they prayed, it was a case of, you know, please, Lord, reveal these things. Well, they heard this crash. And these two figurines, they were of, I believe it was like a Mexican beggar boy or something like that. These apparently very famous. If you go to Mexico on holiday, they'll try to sell you one of these, and they curse them as you buy them. So they brought these cursed objects into their home, and they both fell over and smashed. And once they got rid of them, their problems went away.
Smashed
financial, literally those things, God knocked them over and they smashed. So we can bring things into our home that, like, so I would say, if it makes you uncomfortable, if it is an obviously forbidden object, which of course figurines and things like that, we don't want graven or molded images in our homes anyway. Or if there is symbolism of another religion or of the occult or New Age, try to get those things out of your house. Go and have a good clear out. Take them down to the incinerator in the garden and burn them, because you'll feel so much better when they're gone. I think
so, for sure. I'll give you one other example here, and that is, I took over a pastorate of a church, a little church, and I had a guy from the community come in with a box of prophecy tapes. And he said, I said, well, you're not a part of this church. Well, what brought you over here? He said, well, I heard about you, that you could do supernatural power things. Oh, wow. And he said, I brought my tapes over here. I need to know what I'm going to be. I said, what? He said, I've gone to these meetings, and whenever a prophet comes around, and they'll fix me up a tape of their prophecy. He said, I'm going to be a great evangelist in Africa. I'm going to be this, I'm going to be that, all these prophecy tapes. And he was fully believing. And then he said, I need you to help me figure out which one of these I'm going to be so I can start working toward it. And of course, my advice to him, which I remember it was, the advice was taken, was to go out in back of the church, start a fire, throw all those tapes in there and let them burn up, and then see what the Almighty had for him personally. And I've got to tell you, a couple of those prophecy tapes I have from 30 years ago. And I thought the reason I kept was because, not because I felt high and exalted with this, but I believed that the man was a true prophet. I knew him, I saw his life, and you know, within that time, the incredible prophecies that he said, things I had no interest in at all, they came true. So I hate to say that no prophet of today has the ear of the Father, but I can't say that, because this particular one, at least in my case, came true. But these kinds of things, relics, I guess you'd call them, can be very powerful. And even to deceive, there are so many false prophets and prophecy. And at the time it was cassette tapes. I don't know what they're sending out now, but those can be just as occult an item as anything else. And I'm thinking a lot of, in your symbology there were numerous symbols that you showed that are connected with the Christian church. Like you showed a symbol that's usually on the parament in a church. It's a iota, eta, sigma, IHS. And of course, that's the first 3 letters of the name Jesus in Greek. And you see those all the time, but what they're used for is often a communion or a bloody sacrifice that really is in no way resembling what's going on with Yeshua in the Gospels.
Yeah.
So there are things, what I'm saying is there are things here that are not only in plain sight, but are in the church. They're in your local church.
Yeah.
One of the reasons I am working in a church now, a Baptist church, is because not only are there's none of those things in there, but at my request, they even took out Christmas decorations.
Great.
Yeah, I couldn't believe that. They said they couldn't do that, but the next year you didn't see them.
Yeah.
They were gone.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
because
be
again,
looking at your church.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. The last church that I went to in England, they actually had a menorah, which is very nice to see. They actually had a menorah, which is a lovely thing. But if we start seeing the Star of David everywhere, well, is it the Star of David or is it the Star of Remphan?
Yeah, it depends on your position on that. And when I see, for instance, the menorah, I get a really good feeling because what it stands for. The Star of David, I'm a little bit mixed with that because it's not that it's bad, it's that people and groups have taken these things and made them occult. And my philosophy on that is we need to take them back.
Yes.
We need to sanctify them and take them back if they're ours.
Yeah. Yeah. One other little story that I'm going to finish with, which might seem slightly unrelated, but you mentioned Santeria or Santeria, I don't know quite how it's pronounced. Just a little from the perspective of discernment, I want to share this story because I think when you seek the Lord, listen carefully. I had, over the years, I had 3 cats. And the first 2 came from the same litter. Adorable, absolutely lovely, lovely, lovely cats. One of them went missing and was never found.
Oh, I got a feeling I know where you're going with this.
Yeah.
Continue,
well, I can't remember when I prayed about that. It might have been just after he disappeared, or it might have been after the second one disappeared. But I lost 2 cats and they were never found. And I remember praying about this and the word came to me, Santeria. And I'm like, what? And I thought, well, the area I live in, I mean, really, is anybody? I mean, honestly, I was like, seriously? And then I went and looked it up. And you know what? The name of the local New Age shop was one of the names of the gods they worship in Santeria. And the woman who was running it was involved in the local pagan moot.
The pagan what?
Moot. So a pagan moot is like a meeting group. They all get together to do their pagan stuff together.
Word.
Moot, M-O-O-T.
All right, I never heard that before.
Ah, yeah. So they had a moot around the area that I lived, and clearly people were involved in Santeria. So when you seek the Lord, listen, because clearly there was something there. And in fact, the third cat disappeared for 4 days And I thought, this is, oh my God, I can't believe this is happening again, you know? When he came back, I grabbed him and I kissed him and I squeezed him and I'm like, you're not going out again. And he was an indoor cat from then on. And I never did have any more cats while I stayed there. So clearly something was going on in that area, whether it had anything to do with me personally or just cats in general that they wanted. But I lost 2 cats and they were never found. So
You're suspecting a sacrifice?
I strongly
Oh
suspect
yeah,
a sacrifice.
I'm
And
sure
that's
that
the sort of thing. Yeah. And I've heard stories over the years of things like that happening in Britain.
Wow.
And there's a lot of it about, I'm afraid. So do seek the Lord when you are, when you have issues where you might suspect an item or a problem in a house and you're trying to find out whether something you own might be at the base of it, because the Lord will reveal it. The Lord is always good.
Yeah.
And I hope that this message will be helpful to somebody out there.
We could go on with this for hours.
It's a fascinating subject.
And I'm wondering, I'm feeling a little better. I wonder if we could take up with our plan before and try to do this more often.
Yeah, that would be great.
Okay,
I'd love
because
to.
your stuff that you have is not only unusual, but it's very interesting, and it is explained in a way that I could never do that well with an explanation. And people just like to hear your voice anyway. Thank you, Lis.
Thank you so much, Jackson. Thanks for having me on.
All right. See you next time.
Yeah. Take care.